Thank you for joining us for our continued conversation. In the last episode of Climate Changed, Autumn spoke with Frances Weller. Frances is a psychotherapist, writer, and soul activist whose work has introduced the healing power of grief ritual to thousands of people. Through his organization, Wisdom Bridge, Frances weaves psychology, myth, ritual, and indigenous wisdom to help communities face sorrow, deepen imagination, and remember what it means to be held in communal care. To ground us today, here is a brief excerpt of what Frances had to say about navigating the long dark.
The long dark, this term emerged up out of the ground, out of soul, to say, let's find language that evokes imagination. Let's find language that invites a different mode other than just analytical. It invites a different mode of perception. It does evoke imagination. It evokes a type of silent receptivity to a deep quality of listening that happens in the darkness. Both words are meaningful. Long, meaning this is not going to be to the end of this administration's term. It's not going to be a few years in length. We're talking generations. We're talking at least 2 generations before we might see something coalesce on the far end of repair and restoration, if we make it. So the long gives us a sense that, I won't see the end of this. You might, I'm not going to see the end of the long dark. But that also means there's much work for me to do right now in terms of putting seed in the ground. What can I do that might germinate in the darkness, right? I mean, that's why I love the second part of that phrase, the long dark. Our perception of dark is really so pejorative, so negative. And so we need to reclaim this word and redeem this word to remember the holiness that dwells in the darkness. So I'm sitting here in my cabin in Northern California looking out at redwoods and bays and Doug fir, and I see them because of what's happening in the darkness. Everything I'm seeing is a manifestation of what's happening below the ground, in the dark. The microbes, the mycelia, the minerals, the root exchange, the mutual support that happens in the darkness. So the invitation, again, is for us to slow it down enough to begin to see what the teaching is in the darkness. There's a wonderful phrase by Susan Murphy, an Australian Zen teacher. She said, we must develop the capacity to see with the dark adapted eye. No, so we can see in the darkness. We like things brightly lit, 24/7. It's as if our relationship to darkness is one of great suspicion and anxiety. We want to keep it lit all the time. But at night, we enter the dreaming world. We enter the world where image dominates and gives us a different way of engaging our own personal psychic lives. That's the same space we're being invited into now. The darkness invites dreaming. It invites stillness. It invites quiet. It invites patience, and it invites restraint. We typically want to do something about the problem, right? This crisis we're in right now, let's do something. Well, yeah, I'm not saying don't take actions. There's certain things we can do to mitigate. But I think the return to a different relationship to the ground, to the earth, will require a different kind of listening, a different kind of not doing, of not knowing. In the old language, we are on what we call the via negativa, the road of not doing, the road of restraint, of holding back and waiting. I believe I shared with you and Adrian this term from the Inuit tradition, Kartsuluni. And just for the listeners now, Kartsuluni translates quite literally, sitting quietly together in the darkness, waiting expectantly for something creative to burst forth. And these were the whaling people, and they couldn't go out to hunt until the whale people gave them a song that says that they are in mutual and reciprocal relationship with one another. At the well, people would be offering a gift of one of their bodies for the sustenance of the community. But that took them sitting quietly in the dark, waiting. This is not a white Western tradition. We don't wait. We march forward. We plunge into it. But this
we discover.
we discover, and then we claim, right? So the mode here is very different. I think the long dark is inviting a different kind of gestational.
Autumn, that conversation was such a gift. Thank you for bringing me and our listeners into what felt like a really intimate room with you and with Francis. So wise, so much to share.
So much to share and such good stories. I mean, one of the things I really appreciated about Francis in this conversation and the other time that I spoke with him is he's one of those teachers who always has a story at the ready to really take you as a listener right into the layer of depth that he's trying to speak at and speak to. And yeah, it's so compelling to speak with him about his work.
The best kind of teacher, the ones with stories.
Stories.
Well, the place that your conversation ended totally sparked some stories from me, because thinking about friendship for spiritual leaders who are trying to do the thing, to do the best thing in this climate changed world. We don't say that as our mission statement per se, but that is so the work of the BTS Center. Forming relationships of friendship and collegial camaraderie and honesty and possibility. And I feel so privileged to get to experiment in that realm of work day in and day out at this organization. Wow. And I could tell you about a number of different programs that I think are trying to engage in that space. But I want to tell you a little about one program that we offered a couple of years ago. We called it Climate Advocacy and the Sacred Wild. And we purposefully brought together executive directors or senior leaders of faith and climate or faith and environment organizations. We identified about 20 such leaders, and our purpose was to build intimacy with the natural world, to offer them spaciousness, to have the relationship with nature and with one another that is at the root of what they're working on, but often gets put to the side as there's huge to-do lists and people to call on Capitol Hill and so many things. So we brought them to Maine. We partnered with some amazing organizations to invite people, and then with the Center for Spirituality and Nature to help frame our time together. And I want to share about two sort of favorite moments during this retreat. The first one was when we first gathered. So everyone had come from a number of different places and taken planes and trains and automobiles to get to this retreat center. And we started by saying, you are not allowed to start working on a new project during this retreat. Because these folks, many work with one another already or would be really excited. Ooh, I'm in a room with so-and-so and I'd really like to do this or that project with them. So we said, this is meant to be retreat. This is meant to be immersive. Session. Totally. Try and turn that off. And it's hard. It's really hard. But you're not allowed. This is the boundary. You're not allowed to do the thing you might most immediately do, which is create a new project and more work for yourself. But what does it mean to actually be here to form relationship with the natural world and with one another? The other moment I want to share with you is one of the activities after dark that the Center for Spirituality and Nature led us in was taking infrared flashlights and exploring the flower and vegetable garden that was at the retreat center. And we discovered
To dark.
in the dark that infrared reveals some things that our human eyes do not normally see. So many birds and bugs can see in a whole spectrum of light that we humans can't see in, including there are some flowers that have like visible runways to the pollen that we normally can't see, but like the bugs and the birds can see these like
Oh my
infrared
God.
lines being like, this is where you want to go. Come here, like big signs. And I wanted to share that moment because your conversation with Francis was talking about seeing in the dark. And so it just came so visibly to mind for me, these flashlights that offer a new way of seeing that other creatures already have.
Yes.
And just the other week, my 11-year-old and I, we found that infrared flashlight that had been given out during that retreat. And we went into the woods because we've been learning about mushroom foraging. And we heard rumors that like mushrooms can sometimes have infrared abilities.
Of course they do.
Right? Like, why not?
What can't they do?
Of course they do. We actually did not discover any mushroom infrared capabilities on that outing, but we discovered this fern that was just a glow as soon as we put the infrared light on it. So we're back in our woods, captivated by the wonder of it all. So there are things to see in the dark, and I highly recommend an infrared flashlight.
I know. I'm like, you're blowing my mind right now with this infrared flashlight detail. Also, just, I have to say, I so appreciate the story of this retreat because it highlights two of the things that I was really thinking about after the conversation with Francis Weller. One being the time that it actually takes to deepen into enough intimacy together to really be able to open.
Yep.
And I think, the space of the retreats create the space and create the amount of time and togetherness that is actually needed. And then this piece around leadership, I'm thinking about the boundary that you all set of no projects, no making new work, and how leadership in our society is so often seen as generating new ideas, generating projects, initiating things. And I'm thinking about that juxtaposed with the kind of this call that I heard inside of the conversation with Francis, that the thing that we are actually needing to do is cultivate mature adults and like leadership. So I'm thinking now about leadership as spiritual maturation instead of leadership as initiation, or not initiation in the spiritual sense, but initiation and like initiating work, doing things in the world. And I just really appreciate that by setting a boundary like that with your folks that are coming into the space of the retreat, you're actually inviting them into a different kind of spiritual maturation or a different kind of maturation around their own leadership that isn't about how do you make something out of this experience.
Yep. Our work has been really informed by Margaret Wheatley and her book, Who Do We Choose to Be?
Yeah.
In which she is talking about a concept that's in many spaces for her, but warriors of the human spirit. And it's about being, not about doing. So, and the discernment of what's really happening right now and who do we choose to be in these times. So that retreat for senior leaders was about who are you choosing to be, and having that flow from an intimacy of relationship with fellow leaders and with the natural world as they got to experience it, and less from all the doing, but like that the doing flows from the being.
Well, and it sits right in relationship to this skill set that Francis was talking about us needing to cultivate, the skill set of being and the restraint of just being present and expectantly waiting.
Yeah.
That term that he that he talked about. I mean, I have to say, this is an aside, but one of the things that I've really appreciated about speaking with him
Mm,
is that he's no as older white man, he is doing something that I think a lot of white people are really afraid to do right now, which is intentionally drawing on multiple wisdom traditions, including indigenous wisdom traditions. And I'm putting that work that he's doing where he's not, not claiming the ideas as his ideas, but just claiming
mm,
them as like, this is wisdom for all people to be with and experience. And I'm putting that in relationship to Norma Wong's invitation to
yeah,
us to really think differently about indigeneity
yeah,
and as a way of being that we all actually we all have access to and all need to have access to. And I think that begins with receiving the wisdom teachings unapologetically. And so I just wanted to name that in presence it in this conversation that to me, it is actually a responsibility of like, as we're moving through this long, dark period, it is a responsibility of all people, regardless of your identity. You have a responsibility to figure out how to receive the wisdom
mm,
traditions that are most applicable to this time, which might not be the wisdom tradition that you were raised inside of. Oh, I just threw my pen. But, and so I think I just wanted to presence that
mm.
before we go into any further talking about him, because I know that that's a complexity, or I imagine that that's a complexity that some of our listeners might be holding is like this white guy who's referencing Inuit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think how the pen really got thrown. All right, it's
It
back.
really got
Is
thrown.
it
Okay,
back
it's
in your
back.
hand?
Back in my hand. I have to have it. I have to
I
take
mean, I
notes.
have a pen too. Yes, pens are important.
My fellow nerd.
Oh, yeah. I This question of how we relate to wisdoms that are not of our ancestors, not of our tradition.
Direct lineage, right. Mhm.
Yeah, or even our adopted and practiced traditions, or, becoming part of a particular faith community and learning and adopting those practices.
Mhm.
I think is really something that's worth being in relationship with intention, bringing our best selves to how we relate to those wisdoms. We engaged with a book called Life After Doom, written by Brian McLaren. And he draws on, as a white male, draws on wisdom of indigenous traditions and says, we seeing this wisdom and how needed it is for this particular moment are now invited. He is speaking as a Christian leader. He says,
Mm.
we Christian leaders are now invited to scrap all our old readings of the Bible, acknowledge that they were impacted severely by empire, and bring completely fresh eyes to our own texts, understanding them as indigenous and ecological texts.
Ooh, yeah.
And that is a challenge I have been trying to live into ever since I received that invitation. And it is this question of receiving wisdom and unpacking wisdom within your own community. I don't know,
Mhm.
that balance of using I language but also being appreciative of what others bring. I don't know. You have been in this work of diversity for a long time, and it's a dance. It's an art form. I don't know what else to call it. It's a dance.
Well, it feels very related to just how are we becoming human again? Colonization has pushed us so far into the realm of separation that
Mhm.
we really believe that these categories are real. And you know, in my work, especially my recent as you know, I recently finished writing this book on fugitive practice.
Mm,
And a part of what motivated me to develop this body of work,
mm,
and I wanna, again, naming lineage, I wanna be
mm,
really clear. I didn't come up with the idea of fugitive practice. I'm simply writing inside of a lineage of Black liberation, Black liberatory practice, Black feminist practice in particular.
mm,
So I'm writing in a lineage that includes many, many Black feminist thinkers and spiritual leaders before me who've also taken up this not and I would say it's beyond an identity, but really taken on the shape, the embodied shape of the fugitive, to say, what do we have to learn from this shape? And the shape of the fugitive is, right, what is a fugitive? A fugitive is someone who has escaped from a place and is in hiding. And if we think about fugitivity as a spiritual and political practice, it's about saying, I am going to make myself fugitive from these supremacy systems of separation and categorization and individualism. And for me, part of where that begins is by recognizing that if I genuinely say I do not subscribe to white supremacy as an organizing system of my life, that means that I have to be willing to let go of, there's so much about the way that supremacy system has organized my life that I have to be willing to let go of, including the parts of it that if I align myself with them, it makes me feel safer, right? Like the categories.
Give me
my specific is this, which I think you will love, and maybe some of our listeners will love too. But I went through a real reversal in my relationship with white women in particular, white people, but white women in particular, where I started to realize that if I was in a conversation with a white woman and she was about to violate my boundaries, there was like a particular thing that would happen where her eyes would dilate. And over the course of a bunch of years, I started to see it. And then once I started to see it, I would realize I can see it coming. When when a white woman is about to try to kind of like inappropriately merge with me and violate my boundaries by, doing a white woman thing, she will almost always, inevitably, eyes will dilate because there's a level of dissociation that happens in the moment of the attempted merge. Once I realized that I could see it coming, it reversed my sense of responsibility for what happened next. So instead of orienting as like, I can't believe this person is doing this to me, I started to have a sense of, oh, I'm the more grounded person in the experience. I'm the one who actually knows what's happening, which means I have a different responsibility for how to respond, how to relate, what boundary to have, how to assert my boundary, how to be really, really clear and firm and not participate in the merging. And I kid you not, Nicole, it fundamentally changed the way I relate to white people. So now I've gone through this psychic shift where I don't enter into interactions or conversations with white people cowering in advance or feeling that they have power over me or fearing whatever,
or just
whatever.
like waiting for something to
happen.
Yeah.
And part of that is because I know what to do, and I know that I will do what is needed in the inevitable moment where something does happen, right? Because it's not an if, it's a when. But what I've done is been able to reclaim my agency over my body and my embodied experience of the moment rather than feeling taken under or taken out by someone else's dissociated behavior. For me, that is fugitive practice.
Yeah.
It's about saying that I will not let the system claim me by participating the way that I'm expected to participate, which is to sort of cower and then allow whatever's going to happen until it's over. Instead, I'm just like, oh no, if I see it coming, I'll just say, I'm not available for this conversation. As simple as that. No apology, no explanation.
Now, fugitivity, tell me more about the hiding piece of that, because it feels hiding feels disempowered when I think of that word. But what you just described was not disempowered.
I invite people always to begin with imagining someone who has made themselves fugitive in the context of enslavement.
Yeah.
So if you think about the context of enslavement and the mechanics of the plantation, that The fugitive is someone who, against all odds and despite all evidence to the contrary,
Mm,
has to say, I don't belong here. I belong out there.
mm,
I am free, and I am releasing the sort of uh, I'm courageously and maybe desperately releasing the shackles that say that I'm a not free person, and I'm exiting into the wilderness, into the darkness, and trusting that there is a version of me that I get to step into, even if it's for a short period of time. There is a version of me that I get to step into that is the freest version of myself. And
mm.
in order to do that, I have to make myself invisible to
Okay.
supremacy. So it's the hiding in the sense of I'm removing my body, right? Like if you think about
Mm-hmm.
under conditions of enslavement, people who were enslaved were property, right? So the act of theft is that they're stealing themselves away from
Nice.
the system, right? They're stealing their own body. So there is an element of hiding and secretiveness and
Yep.
moving in darkness that
Yep.
is a part of what the fugitive has to do.
Yep. Because of
But
the
it's
systems that they're in.
Yes, yes. And so of course now, the because it's not really it is and isn't a metaphor, right? We still
Right.
are
Right.
living under pretty extraordinary supremacy systems. We still have people who are being literally, I mean, right now,
Enslaved.
kidnapped off the
Yes.
streets and
Yeah.
enslaved and locked up and all the things. Like all these things are happening. And part of what that means is that there's not unlike, a couple hundred years ago, it's not like there's a safer place to geographically go to right now without leaving the country. But even that presents its own, significant security concerns. And so to me, it's the practice of fugitivity now is about practicing the freest version of
Mm.
myself in this context.
Mm-hmm.
And having a felt experience that regardless of the conditions, I am a free person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to me, this relates to both the wisdom that we heard from Francis Weller and similarly the wisdom we heard from Norma Wong, this thing that you lifted up about the being versus doing,
Yeah.
that we often think about freedom as something that we do,
Right. Right.
but actually freedom is something that we are.
Are. Nice.
And
Yeah.
it requires practice to remember that we actually are free, even inside of a context that says that we're not free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks so much to the soul work that we have in these times, in this climate changed world, this kind of context that we keep coming back to in this podcast of climate changed world is so external, and it's uh, and it's getting faster. I mean, you talked about pace of change with Francis, and it can be so distractive and overwhelming. So to claim within that a sense of my soul, my heart is mine, and I get to choose how I meet this moment is really powerful. I wonder, as you've been hosting this season of Climate Changed, just how your exploration of fugitivity informed the questions you were asking. Do you feel like, the things you wanted to probe about were impacted by just that deep thinking and writing and becoming public on all these
Well,
pieces?
certainly, I mean, I would say fugitivity absolutely informed probably all of the questions that I asked all of our guests, but certainly with Francis, I've been really through my own work, I've been really touching into the importance of ritual
Mm,
and the need for creating new rituals as a part of formulating new ways of thinking and being together
yeah.
in a way that reifies or reinforces the idea that we're free.
Yeah.
Because I started to notice it over the years, I really started, especially in my political work, because for years I worked with community organizations who were working on the front lines of some of the most critical issues of the time that we're living through. but the internal realities of these organizations and the internal realities of the people who were inside of them was so full of pain, so much pain, so much anguish, so
Mm.
much, reinforcing and repetition of the harm that everyone is fighting. I was always being called in to work with organizations where the exact dynamics that everyone was fighting externally were the
Yes.
things that were playing out internally.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it's because the
Mhm.
organizational shape, both logistically but also spiritually, was mirroring
Yeah, of course.
the external conditions, the institutional
Well,
conditions,
this
and
happens in churches all the time, right? People are like,
all the
"This
time.
is church, everybody should be righteous and there should be no conflict." And like, "We're actually this is just another organization in our world."
Right, right. And actually, I mean, so much of it does come down to how we do conflict, right? There's that in and of itself. The idea that being that somehow having values alignment would result in there being no friction and nothing to decide ever is like,
Boring.
it's so weird. But also, again, to me, that's also an expression of separation
Yeah.
and the heterogeneity or homogeneity that is trying to be enforced by these institutions of supremacy. That the idea that if you all just behave in alignment with the categories, then there will be no friction because everything will be working. And then folks inevitably find themselves in the actual mess of human life, and then they feel they're not equipped. They're not
Yeah.
equipped. And so I started to notice in my own work the importance of, well, at first it was just bringing attention to, like, what are the rituals and ceremonies that y'all are engaged in that you don't even realize that you're engaged in,
Nice.
that you know what I mean? Because everyone's engaged in ritual and ceremony. They're just often not, it's unintentional.
Mhm. Yeah, it's not
And so
thoughtful.
then
Yeah.
it's not thoughtful, it's not intentional, it's, rituals of berating,
Mm, mm, No.
ceremonies of harm. Ceremonies of harm, right? That's what a lot of people are engaged in, and
Yeah.
so first it was just bringing attention to that of, like, what are we ceremonializing here? And then saying,
Mhm.
can we create new and different ceremonies? Can we create different rituals that actually give us a sense that we are in real community with one another? Mm. And so that being something that I was already really wrestling with meant that when I was coming into this conversation with Francis in particular, I'm like, this is someone who has spent decades trying to figure out how to support people in a US context to, as he named it, to re-engage with the primal matrix, like the thing that we are actually primed to experience and are not getting to experience in
Mm.
our society. And I feel it feels almost like an overwhelming level of problem.
Yeah, right.
We
Right.
think of climate change as the
Right.
overwhelming problem, but to me,
It's a
the actual
symptom.
problem that feels overwhelming exactly is
Yeah.
that the element where we're like, oh wow, we are. And I appreciated that Francis named it as something that we first and foremost need to grieve. That the Yes, this is part of the long dark is being in this time period, these generations where there has been years of absence of ritual.
Yeah.
That's part of how we got here, and ritual is part of how we find our way out.
Yeah. The grief piece is so powerful, and the long timeness of proclaiming this moment as the long dark, and that engaging with what you described as, yes, so overwhelming that it feels like I can't make a difference on this. And so saying, you know what, this is a generations long situation that we are in. We have a moment that we are blessed with to be alive. And what we're working on, we're not going to see the end of. And accepting that at the beginning
Right.
allows us to continue to choose who we're going to be in these times that may be long and may be dark.
And I think that, to me, that is one of the gifts of the fugitive orientation,
Yeah.
is placing yourself in a much longer timeline and understanding that you're not working on behalf of your own freedom.
Mm,
You're working on behalf of a future freedom of a future generation that you likely won't you won't necessarily have contact with in the same timeline that you're currently in, but that doesn't mean that your work is any less important or meaningful. That you're part of a much bigger story of freedom. And what a blessing. To me, it's been
Yeah.
actually so freeing
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
not think of my freedom work as being on my own behalf, because it liberates me into actually doing what I can do instead of feeling frozen, like I can't, like nothing I do matters.
Autumn, I'm so grateful to your willingness to dive deep with the concept of fugitivity and to work to put it out to the world in a book format that I will pick up as soon as it is available. But to go deep with these concepts that will be helpful. And fugitivity is so provocative. It's both like provocative and empowering. So, yeah,
Thank you.
I'm
I'm so
excited.
glad.
Yeah, it's been such a gift to have that perspective with us for this series of episodes in Climate Changed.
Well, it's been such a gift for me to get to be a part of this series and be in conversation with you and all of our amazing guests. It's just
Mm.
the greatest gift and very much a part of my freedom.
Beautiful. Love it. So, as we turn to some next steps, which are important for us in this podcast, as we often get pretty caught up in ideas to make sure that we are offering our sense of what could be some meaningful and achievable next steps. And I think I might start just inviting you to consider some of Francis's questions that surfaced in his conversation with Autumn. Those questions include,
Mm.
what are the actual hazards in your place? And what gifts do you and your communities carry that could be brought to bear when crisis comes? And I invite you, as you think about that, to be both imaginative and specific. And another question Francis asks, just as importantly, who are your friends? Who are the people with whom you can practice slowing down, practice telling the truth, and practice holding one another in love?
We also asked Francis to offer a next step that you can take after hearing this episode, something small, grounded, and doable in our daily lives. So let's hear what Francis had to say. As you reflect on Francis's words, we would like to invite you to consider trying something out. Gather 3 to 5 people, could be friends, neighbors, or members of your faith community, for what we would call a listening circle. Take an hour, maybe 2. Sit together, turn off your phones,
Mm,
very important, and simply take turns naming one thing in your life or in the world that is weighing on your heart.
mm.
Allow space for silence, especially when you run out of things to say. You don't need to solve anything, just practice being present and holding one another with attention. Measure it by whether everybody in the circle has been heard once. That's your only measure.
Love that idea. I'll bring in something for any of you who maybe facilitate or offer leadership in spaces and have the ability to slow things down. I'd invite you to consider 2 or 3 minutes of silence as a tool to be deployed in your facilitator's toolkit as you come into a meeting or as you make a transition or even as you're closing, to deploy 2 or 3 minutes of shared quiet. And that's how I usually introduce it. We're going to spend some time in shared quiet. And usually when it's wrapping up, I will say something about how that may have felt short to you or that may have felt long to you. And it's usually true that different people receive those couple minutes of shared quiet differently. I know I am often surprised at actually how long and how effective 2 or 3 minutes can be.
So true. So true. 2 minutes turns out is a long time. Thank you, Nicole. That's an awesome next step. And thank you, listeners. Thank you for listening to Climate Changed, a podcast from the BTS Center. To learn more about our work and find resources connected to this episode, visit the BTS Center.
Climate Changed is a podcast from the BTS Center, which is located in beautiful Portland, Maine. Our show is produced by Peterson Toscano. Thank you, Peterson. You can find transcripts, discussion guides, and now full-length video episodes with bonus material on the BTS Center's YouTube page. Explore more about our in-person and online programs at the BTS Center. I would love to see you at an upcoming program.
Stay connected, share this episode, and reach out anytime. Remember, you can email us, podcast@thebtscenter.org. We love hearing from you.
And a blessing. As we close this episode, may you lean into the long dark, knowing that you are not alone. You, climate change listener, are part of a community of friends who care. Together, let us grieve, let us imagine. For it is indeed a blessing to be alive right now.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Nicole. Coming up on the next episode of Climate Changed.
There was a day that he said, you know, I always thought of you as smart, but when did you become wise? This message really touched me because my dad is often the one who comes home from church and says, okay, we were asked to slow down and reflect again. Really, I want to get to work. I want the sermon to be about a piece of action.
People need something worth longing for, something
yes.
worth working and fighting for. And that's the job of storytellers like me and all of us. We need to paint a picture of the future that is so compelling, so textured, so delicious that even people who don't think they care about climate change might say, wait, I want to live in that world.
I think that in hearing the separation that we're experiencing is by design. To some degree, like this is the condemnation that the powerful and the wealthy have concocted in order to make it easy to exploit and extract from land, from the more than human world, and from humans.